well, people say that, he can't do this, he can't do this, he can't do that. Okay, but let's talk about what he can do. Yeah. So you know what? So LeRon Barton has struggles talking. When I'm in a group of people and when I have to introduce myself, my anxiety is like through the roof, right? But so all right, that's so I have my days, but I'm gonna tell you what I can do.
Hey everybody, I am Dr. Kristen Donnelly, one of the good doctors of Abbey Research. At Abbey Research, we deeply believe that curiosity can change the world because it's honestly the only thing that ever has. Once we learn each other's stories and worldviews and expand how we see the world through the lens of somebody else, we move through the world a little bit differently. There's lots of social science research behind that, but also just like, trust me, that's how it works. So this series is in service of that. It's called Welcome to My World, and I get to talk to people from all over the place who are different than me, which is everybody, about something in their lives that knowing it would make our lives richer. None of us know how to human, folks. We're all figuring it out as we go along, so let's figure it out together. And today I am incredibly honored to be joined by 3-time TEDx speaker and dear mutual friend of our mutual friend, Trisha Brooke, who you've heard me talk about on this channel a whole heck of a lot. LeRon Barton is an author, speaker, writer who talks about race, mass incarceration, politics, business, tech, and dating. Because when I think mass incarceration, I think about Tinder. He has written 2 books, one called Straight Dope, a 360-degree look into American drug culture, and another one called All We Need Is Love. His 3 TED Talks are going to be below with the rest of his socials. I cannot wait to have this conversation. LeRon, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Donnelly. Although you've told me to call you Kristen, I just love just like calling people like their titles. You know what? I remember like there was a joke that I saw. It was like this woman, she's getting married, and she was like, well, she's asked, well, are you going to keep your last name? And she was like, yeah, because I'm a doctor, because I work for that shit. So it's like, I was like, all right, it's so. It's
like you get a vibe. I don't know. And I know a lot of other lady doctors that I know and people with titles, because I have a lot of pastor friends who are like Reverend Doctor or Reverend. And there's people that you end up using that as a bit of a power flex for, because you can tell they're all they're going to do. But for me, I don't ever want it to be a barrier to authentic relationships.
Right.
I don't want anyone to ever think like that Aaron and I think we're better than people because we sat in libraries for a long time. So that's why I say that. But hey, I am Dr. Donnelly and I'm also Kristen. So I'm all these things.
Own it.
I do not want to waste any time talking about me, sir.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Can you, I think the thing I'd love to hear the first about is your first TED Talk was about overcoming your stutter.
Yes.
And I know that's a big part of your story. So can you unpack that for folks?
100%. So, it's funny, like, as a writer, I've written a lot about, my personal life as far as my relationships, my relationship with my father, racism, white supremacy, anti-blackness, mass incarceration, just my, how I interact with those things. And so when I write, Kristen, like I always like to ground my story in what I call facts. Let's just ground it in facts and let's put my personal touch on it so it can be refuted. And so for a while, I was asked, well, why don't you ever talk about your stutter? I was like, yeah, that's really personal. And so it was something that I just didn't really want to talk about. And so it's funny, God works in mysterious ways. And so when I began to apply for TEDx's, I was like, well, what's the most personal thing in my life? It's like, well, my stutter. And so, I was finally ready to tell that story. And when I did that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to talk about this. And at the time, Kristen, was funny. It's like I hadn't really overcame it. Like I was dealing with it, but I hadn't quote unquote owned it. It was just something that I didn't really talk about. It's just something like, oh well, yeah, I kind of stutter, but it was never a topic that I just came forward with, and I never led with it. And so when I did the TEDx, this was my first one. I was inspired by gosh, I'm blanking on I'm sorry, Sir Ken Robinson's talk on education, where he said we need an education revolution, not an evolution. And I'll never forget when I heard that, I was like, wow, this dude is unbelievable. And so my TEDx, Kristen, I wanted to write a speech and deliver a speech that showed people that just because you have a stutter, this disability, that doesn't mean that you can't do everything that everyone else does.
Yeah.
And when I did it doing that TEDx, I always tell people it changed my life in so many ways, not because of the opportunities or because of the fact that you can go on YouTube and see me giving a TEDx, but because it finally said, okay, LeRon, this is a part of you, but this isn't you. And I became no longer ashamed of it. And that was the biggest thing. And after I did that, Kristen, like a big weight was just lifted off my shoulders. I was like, you know what? So what? So what? I have a stutter. So, now when I'm talking to people and I'm much more confident about it, and I tell people, oh, by the way, I have a stutter, just so you know. And if you've talked to me within a long period of time or years and years, you can tell that I have a stutter, and it's something that I don't shy away from now. And so that was the thing about the TEDx, Kristen. It's like I just wanted to just let people know, hey, listen, you know what? I have this this disability. This is something that I've been dealing with since the age of 6, and the audacity of me to want to get on one of the most respected stages in the entire world and talk. And so my ex would always say, you're being of service. And so that's what I would like to think that I did with that TEDx.
I've watched it several times, and I will tell you, yes, you were.
Thank you so much.
I've watched all 3 of yours several times. In fact, I really love what you brought in Farmingdale about the importance of the moment. And,
that was an incredible moment, man. Just, yeah.
What George does at Farmingdale is real special. Like, not that other TEDx's aren't special, but because every curator is different and every curator is unique, I think we all experience different emotional alchemies at different TEDx events. So I can't wait to do a Farmingdale, like to be in person at a Farmingdale event.
Oh my goodness. Like George, like, it's funny. So we did that in the midst of COVID. And so it was definitely different than any other TEDx that I done. And so when you're in it, you don't really know how unique it is, right? Because, you're just trying to memorize speech, you're getting to Farmingdale, you want to be around people. And, looking back on that moment, it was a really special event. George is awesome. I mean, initially I had my concerns about him. I'm like, is he biting off more than he can chew? But just when we talked about the event months after, I really got a chance to really kind of understand how everything went. And just, he's a really good guy. Like, I like George a lot. And, George has done, what George did for us, is like that is a special moment that no one can take away from us,
Yep, so true. I feel that way about the curators I've gotten to work with as well, for sure. So I want to redirect really quickly. You very clearly use the word disability with your stutter.
100%.
I definitely heard other people push back against the label as that. Can you tell me about your intentionality with that word?
Sure. So it's funny, I so my favorite historical person ever is Malcolm X, and one of the things he said is that make it plain, right? And so I think that this this is a disability. Like we have a problem with a basic form of communication that is talking. Whether it be by birth, whether it be an accident, your anxiety level raises, and you have trouble saying basic words. Like there's times that I have trouble saying my own name because I'm so my nerves are just jumbled around. And to call it anything else, it's kind of a disservice because look, when we talk about disability, Kristen, the first thing that pops in my head is the inability to walk. Because you're in a wheelchair, you are paraplegic, you're just immobile. But what people have to understand is there's more than just physical disabilities. There's mental disabilities. There's, what I have is a verbal disability. Not having sight, that is a disability. Not having the ability to hear, that is a disability. I think that one of the reasons why people may shy away from that because I guess it's not as severe. But understand, like when you have trouble talking, like it is one of those things where it just destroys your confidence. It makes you not want to try and talk. Yeah. So there's levels, as the kids say, there's levels to this, right? And so there are levels to how severe a disability is, and I'm not going to pretend like it's something that it's not. This isn't just something that, oh well, it's a tick. No. Like this is a disability. Over 70 million people in the world stutter. So why would I downplay it? Like that's just like 1% of the world's population stutters, and my TED has almost 250,000 views on it, right? People who stutter, that's a lot of people. So I'm sorry, for me, Kristen, that does qualify as a disability.
No, I mean, that makes complete sense. And I am fascinated always with language. That's one of the things and the evolutionary 100%. Nature of it and the elastoplasticity of it. And this is the same thing. Like I refuse to be referred to as plus sized, like clothing right. Plus sized. I am fat. And like, that is something like, that's what I want. That's the word I use for myself. When people push back against it, to me, it's a lot more about them than it is about me. And so okay. Like, that's something that
do you use it more for like, so it's funny, like I was in a clubhouse room talking about this subject. Do you use that word from like, as far as like the political aspect of it, or you just like, look, I'm not with the niceties. I'm just gonna call it what it is.
I think it's a little bit of both, because sizeism is the last thing that's acceptably like that you can't push back against.
100%.
We haven't figured out how to do anti-sizeism. And like even just this past week, like I met a total stranger who asked me what my diabetic blood sugar count was, and I was
just like cool. Coming into my personal space. Like
cool. I'm not diabetic. Like I'm not diabetic at all. And this happens a lot. Like it's all those kind of things. And so for me, some of it is, I know I have some thin privilege within fat spaces. Like I'm still a smaller fat person. And so if I can get people to understand that the response to, and this might be the same with your disability. So this is where I'm going with this. So when I say I'm fat, I'll have people say, no, you're beautiful. And I'm like,
yeah, well, thank you.
What you just said is that fat people can't be beautiful, and that's not true. So let's push back against that. So I want it to be political because everything's political. You know that. I know that. Everything's intersectional. Everything's political. But I also want to stop. I want to stop people hiding behind labels that don't do anything.
Sure.
Like plus size is clothing. Obese is based on a racist system called the body mass index, which doesn't tell us anything.
100%.
So like the word that like, I am a larger person. Okay. I'm big boned. I am all those things. I also carry more fat than some other people. I'm just fat. And when I use it that way, it takes away its power to be a shaming element.
Right.
So as you've been going on your journey since you were 6, I'm wondering if people have responded to your very clear, no, this is a disability, or I have a disability, if they've tried to push back in quote unquote kindness.
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, whenever, and mind you, like I didn't start calling this a disability until 2018. So again,
so
like
it's only been a minute.
Yes, ma'am. So
Okay.
with the TED, like, it's allowed me to really just not be ashamed of it and just to be like, hey, you know what? Yes, yes, I have a stutter, deal with it. But I do think that, some people, what it is, it's like if you're in a space and if you call, if I tell someone who's a paraplegic, you have a disability, then it's like they're like, oh my God, why are you trying to just sort of shoehorn everything in together? And and it's like, well, for one, it's not about you, A. B, there are ranges of disabilities. I mean, that's what people have to understand, right? And so I say this as someone who thinks of things from a very black and white perspective, but what I realize, like how inadequate that is in life, right? Because I mean, life is, as much as I hate to say this, Kristen, like life is really all about the gray areas in some ways, right? And so you have to have a sort of flexibility. Everything can't be so binary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, look, another thing, when we think of the word disability, when you say someone is disabled, that means that something's wrong with that person, right? That obviously, like, they have something that cannot be fixed. And so it's just not being honest, right? And so, similar to what you were talking about, is as far as language, I've always known, and then I live by this: words have power, right? So you talked about the intentionality of it. The reason why that I call it a disability is because this is something that not everyone possesses, and this stops you, or it does not allow you to talk more freely, or as we call it in the studying spaces, more fluently. And so because I'm not fluent all the time, and this is not something that I'm doing on my own. This is an impairment that
Right.
I have. So because you don't want to own that, that's fine. Listen, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but at the end of the day, for me, LeRon Barton, yeah, my stuttering is a disability. And if that does not make you comfortable, well, then I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
no,
sorry.
I think, like, that's how I feel about so many things. Like, I think, I completely agree, first of all, that binaries are a myth that we use to sell products. And everything is gray, and everything's a spectrum, and everything is messy because human persons are messy. And so Our ideas are messy, our identities are messy, everything is messy. And I think one of the greatest lies that America has ever peddled is through largely marketing and propaganda in the 50s, was that there was ever a time where that wasn't true.
Right.
And so that's something I think we're loudly, especially our generation, is getting really loud about. And it's like, no, we're not doing this anymore. Like,
right.
let's have these conversations. But I love also what you said about this is what it is to me. Right. And if that isn't what it is to you, that also has nothing to do with me.
Absolutely. Listen, this isn't, so one of the things that I hate, I shouldn't say hate, I really detest this term, Kristen. It's like when someone says, I'm living in my truth. I'm like, that's stupid. Like, that's, you're based. So that just basically means like that you're just trying to just justify bullshit. Excuse my language. But I mean, though, but I mean, come on, let's keep it funky. However, True. So a lot of people want to shy away from the truth, right? A lot of, and I think that when you have a truth that is very unpopular, that is just that just kind of hits hard. I mean, such as a stutter being a disability. It when when so in my TEDx speech, the thing that I hit home the most is that your stutter is something that you have. It is not you,
Yeah.
right? And so when you talk to many disability advocates, they'll say, okay, yeah, I got this. So what? There's millions of other things that are about me.
Yep.
Listen, LeRon Barton stutters. Okay, boom. I'm also a brother. I'm a friend. I'm a son. I'm a grandson. I'm a writer. I'm an essayist. I
And I
I'm
think I
I'm a
love
world
this.
traveler.
Yeah, because it's also recognizing the multifunctionality of every human being. And I think
100%.
like earlier this year, Dr. Aaron and I did a whole series here on the channel of documentaries about the Olympics.
Right.
And one of the ones that we watched was the one that Michael Phelps produced about the mental health crises among Olympic athletes and the spate of death by suicide that has happened among elite athletes over the last several years. And one of the things that he said really resonates with what you just said, which is why I want to bring it up, which is that no one ever tells us that we're not our sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
True.
so like, that's it. Like for me, I don't have any physical disabilities, but I have really high functioning anxiety that sometimes just takes over my entire self-concept. And
Totally.
I cannot function outside of that lens. Even with medical and therapeutic help, there are just days where that doesn't work.
Right.
But I was very fortunate that early on in my journey towards a diagnosis and everything else, I had some people that were like, hey, you have anxiety, you are not anxiety.
Exactly.
And like that has, for me, I have learned, and talking to you, this really clarified this even just now, like what an incredible privilege that was in my journey. And so I love what you're saying too, that like, and again, for anyone who hasn't watched LeRon's TED, please do. But how do we, especially with kids, help them understand that their body is only a part of them? Like how do we kind of play with this? Because my understanding, and I believe you said this somewhere else that I read, is that stuttering mostly shows up in childhood.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So 2 years ago, I got a chance. I was a guest in a sort of a stuttering. It was a stuttering gathering where I spoke to kids. And let me tell you something, Kristen. Like if I had that when I was younger, things would be totally different. Like,
yeah,
I can't describe to you. This is one of the greatest things I've done in a long time is to sit with children. As someone, they look at me as like, oh my God, this guy, he's done it. He speaks everywhere. He did a TEDx, and I'm just like, I'm marveling, like I'm taking away more than what I'm giving because it's a privilege for me to sit here and be amongst these kids who have the self-awareness that you and I didn't have back in our generation. Of course, there's more language and people are, the times are evolving, but just the fact that they have the ability and the privilege to be sitting here. And so kids can be cruel, right? Obviously, I was teased a lot having a stutter. Like people would just and I'm like, you little asshole. But it's like still, kids can be very cruel. And so similar to what Mr. Phelps said within the documentary that you described, is like, we have to, from an early age, we have to tell people that, you are not what affects you the most. Like, as you said earlier, we are multifaceted people. And, because that there is a disability, there's a tendency to focus on that one thing, right?
Oh,
I
great.
mean, and and again, listen, like, I have a stutter. My disability isn't like a paraplegic's disability or someone within a wheelchair. So I'm not trying to compare that, nor would
They're
I.
uncomparable, and that's not the point. Yeah.
They are uncomparable. But I'm just telling just people who have a stutter, if you're listening to this, that is a small part of who you are. Listen, there's no cure for it, right? But I tell you something, Kristen. Like, if there was a cure for me stuttering, and if they said, hey, you take this pill, you'll stop stuttering, that would that mean I would never do it, because it's made me who I am today. Like, my stutter is a part of my journey, so I'm not going to, like, why would I want to abandon it? Like, that's part of who LeRon Barton is, and I love LeRon Barton. So it's like, when you talk about your weight, you're like, look, like, I'm this, and I love who I am. So it's like, no, like, it's just that we have to focus on who we are from the totality. There's a sports analysis I love, Shannon Sharp, incredible human being, and he was talking about Giannis. Can't pronounce the young man's last name.
Yeah, but I know. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
And so it's like, he was saying, well, people say that he can't do this, he can't do this, he can't do that. Okay, but let's talk about what he can do. Yeah. So you know what? So LeRon Barton has struggles talking. When I'm in a group of people and when I have to introduce myself, my anxiety is like through the roof, right? But so, all right, that's, so I have my days, but I'm gonna tell you what I can do, and so instead of just focusing on that one part of my life, you're missing out on like 80, 90 different things,
Exactly. That's such a beautiful way for us to hit pause on this conversation, because there's no way you and I are done talking. I definitely already would love to invite you back so we can talk a little bit about mass incarceration, because I would love
100%.
Love to hear your thoughts and educate us and our channel on that. I know not nearly enough. So already we'll be sliding into your email to invite you back. LeRon, this has been a delight. And I am so glad awesome. that you
Billy
gifted us with your presence. I'm so grateful. Pals, if you enjoyed our conversation, please hit that thumbs up. The YouTube algorithm really loves it. If you love the vibe of the conversation, I get to have a lot of them. So you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you don't miss a single thing. Aaron and I get to talk to fascinating folks and each other all the time about popped and lived culture and how those things can help you build empathy. So I am Dr. Kristen Donnelly. My guest today has been LeRon Barton, the wonderful LeRon Barton. This has been Welcome to My World, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.